Our second lesson this morning comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 18, verses 1 through 15. Listen now for God's word to you. God appeared to Abraham at the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance of his tent. It was the hottest part of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing. He ran from his tent to greet them and bowed before them. He said, "Master, if it please you, stop for a while with your servant. I'll get some water so you can wash your feet. Rest under this tree. I'll get some food to refresh you on your way, since your travels have brought you across my path." They said, "Certainly, go ahead." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. He said, "Hurry, get 3 cups of our best flour, knead it, and make bread." Then Abraham ran to the cattle pen and picked up a nice plump calf and gave it to the servant, who lost no time getting it ready. Then he got curds and milk, brought them with the calf that had been roasted, set the meal before the men, and stood there under the tree while they ate. The men said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" He said, "In the tent." One of them said, "I'm coming back about this time next year. When I arrive, your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was listening at the tent opening just behind the man. Abraham and Sarah were old by this time, very old. Sarah was far past the age for having babies. Sarah laughed within herself. An old woman like me get pregnant with this old man of a husband? God said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Me? Have a baby, an old woman like me?' Is anything too hard for God? I'll be back about this time next year, and Sarah will have a baby." Sarah lied. She said, "I didn't laugh," because she was afraid. But he said, "Yes, you did. You laughed." When our family first moved to the Northeast, people often asked what was the biggest difference between here and Nebraska. And I almost always answered with a simple traffic and trees. In the Northeast, there is an abundance of both. And in the ancient Near East, during the time of Abraham, unlike here in the Northeast, trees were few and far between. They were typically found in mountainous regions, along riverbeds, or as part of a desert oasis. And even though they only dotted the ancient Near Eastern landscape, trees were environmentally and spiritually significant. They were both strange and beautiful, ancient and magnificent. And they ranged from small shrub-like trees to majestic and tall cedars. In the Bible, trees played a key role in many narratives. In fact, they are the 3rd most mentioned organic life form in the Bible, behind only humans and animals. Throughout the whole history of creation, trees have provided food and shelter and shade for all varieties of organisms. They lower temperatures, filter water, sequester carbon dioxide, provide medicine, and they continually pump out the life-sustaining oxygen we all breathe. Trees are a sign and symbol of the existence of life itself. Their enormous branches reaching towards the heavens deep connections to the waters that lie within the earth, and their ability to sustain and nurture life and longevity with resilience has always captured the imaginations and interest of us human beings. Take Methuselah, for example, a great basin bristlecone pine in California's White Mountains. That tree is estimated to be 4,800 years old, and its identity and location are a secret in order to keep it safe. Or in Utah, for example, there is a forest of genetically identical aspen trees called the Pando. And this forest of trees has a root system believed to be 80,000 years old. And here, in the Hudson River Valley, in the small community of Bedford, New York, a short 15-mile drive from Old Greenwich, is this 500-year-old white oak. A single oak tree with a trunk width of 30 feet in circumference and a canopy that spans roughly 130 feet wide. This tree, it was here when the people indigenous to this region thrived on this land freely. This tree survived the colonization, deforestation, and settlement of this land. This oak stood tall through both the Revolutionary and Civil Wars. And in the face of countless nor'easters, massive superstorms, bug infestations, and considerable industrialization, this oak tree endured as a life-giving and life-sustaining presence. In the Bible, trees were often signposts and gathering places. They were places people went to pray to God, hoping to find the presence of God. And quite often that happened for them. It happened with Moses and the burning bush, Adam and Eve at the tree of life, and with Abraham under the oaks of Mamre. In the story of Abraham at the beginning, God asked him to do a new thing and move to a new land. And that he did. And upon his arrival, Abraham surveyed every square foot of that unfamiliar place he found himself. And he decided to settle in the vicinity of the great oak trees, where God, as we read in our lesson this morning, visited him and his wife Sarah in the form of 3 men and pronounced to him and to her that they would conceive and bear a child. And from this child, a great nation would arise, just as God had promised to Abraham when he asked him to leave his homeland. Throughout human history, trees often served as a point of connection between humanity and the divine. And that is a large reason why we as human beings are drawn to the trees, especially great, grand trees like this one, and to the wilderness they inhabit, and to the life that they offer. And in some deeply spiritual and mystical way, we long to embody the life-giving, nurturing, resourceful, sustaining, and resilient characteristics of the trees that surround us. And as I stand here and look at a tree like this massive oak, I see some broken and gnarly branches and old wounds that have scarred and healed over time. And these flaws, these imperfections in these trees, they each have a story to tell. Perhaps it's a story about a storm or a lightning strike. Or maybe it's a storm about a bitter winter. or an unfortunate human interaction. Each flaw, though, it has a story to tell. Each broken branch, each branch supported by the ground, makes this tree what it is. Without these wounds, this tree would not be that interesting, and it simply would not be the same. And the same is true for us human beings. In our individual lives and in our society and community as a whole. You see, we all experience times of trauma, moments of abuse, neglect, and we do things we regret, and we find ourselves in situations we would not wish upon our worst enemies. And as a whole nation, we are going through one of these moments right now. A disruptive, disheartening, and painful time in our collective history. During this time, as we are going through it, we may find ourselves asking the question, why? Why now? Why must we experience this pain? Why must we go through this trauma again and again? I think the answer to that question, it is that we actually have to go through these difficult times to become better, to become stronger, to be more unified. We have to experience these rough moments together. And I came to that conclusion this week as I was doing my research on trees. So you see, we know that each year a tree grows a new ring, and the size, nature, and composition of that ring develops and is influenced largely by outside environmental factors. For example, a ring formed during a wet and mild spring looks much different than a ring that experienced drought, heat, or trauma from a storm. Some rings within a tree, then they're thick, and some are thin. Some are waxy, and some are dry. But a strong, healthy, robust tree relies on a variety of different layers, which offer different tensile strengths for that tree to survive. You see, a tree that only experiences ideal conditions for years and years, it will lay down the same type of thick ring year after year. And the moment adversity hits, that tree won't know what to do, and it likely won't make it. So I believe we human beings are much the same. We must experience the ups and the downs of life. We must develop the scars, feel some pain, and pick up some of our own wounds like this one along the way. We must go through those experiences if we want to be healthy, vibrant, and strong. And so I hold firm right now to the hope and the belief that we as a collective community, we will find a way through this, that we will continue on, that we will get through this moment in time together. And even though there will be a deep scar left upon us by this pandemic, by the systemic injustice we are feeling, by the civil unrest that surrounds us, and the loss of life and jobs we are experiencing together. In the end, it will all add to our strength. In the end, we will find God in the midst of the pain we are experiencing, and it will make us stronger, and it will make us more resilient, like this beautiful oak tree. Amen.